Welcome, Ralph. We just did the Pitt Research Semiconductor Conference, which I thought was really interesting, a lot of insights. You presented there.
I did, yes, thanks.
Can you talk us through Sensera, your different activities, and then sort of, for viewers that are not too familiar with the company, essentially, what you do, where you derive revenues from?
Great. Well, thank you. Sensera is an interesting company because we are really being driven by the IoT explosion, and the company does very unique sensors from a standpoint of building the actual structures for those sensors all the way through deploying them into a system that is wirelessly connecting sensors and addresses very specific end markets. And it's an exciting time for us as we sort of go down the journey there of putting these sensor networks in place in order to drive value for our customers.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about your IP portfolio? You basically develop everything in-house, but can you talk a little bit about sort of your IP position, also how it's protected?
Great. Yeah. So, obviously, since we just had the semiconductor conference, I'll start on that end, which is every MEMS device that we build is a brand new structure, is a brand new physical implementation to do a certain type of sensing. We're known for microfluidics, which is a very specific opportunity in measuring, liquids of some sort. So, the IP we develop is unique in every one of those devices. Now, there's some core pieces, and some of that is controlled by patents, but there's a lot of individual unique structures we build. Our model is unique because we do get some funding from customers to build that, some non-recurring engineering fees, but at the end of the day, we own the IP, so they don't pay for everything,
right.
Which is important because we do leverage that across other products.
Right. Okay. And looking at your various activities, so on the sensor side, within Nanotron, for instance, but also the sort of really the MEMS side of the business, where you've sort of catered to medical devices industry. Can you talk a little bit about the different growth profiles that you see in the next coming years for both segments?
Yeah, so both segments are growing very rapidly, so first and foremost, but actually in this coming fiscal year that we're entering we believe we're going to see more significant growth out of the MEMS part of the business, just because of certain customers and opportunities that we have at that stage, at
right.
that growth stage. And we've announced some of our partners there are key medical companies, one of which is Abiomed, that makes heart pumps, and their business is doing well. So obviously that means we're doing well, and we're now shipping multiple products to them, and that will continue throughout fiscal year 20 and beyond. And then we have a number of others staged right behind that from other customers, which we haven't formally announced yet, but that will also ramp in fiscal year 20.
Yeah, so last year was a great year for you guys in terms of growth. For this year, you sort of given guidance actually for financial year 19. Looking out, say, next couple of years, can you talk a little bit about your expected sort of growth rates?
Yeah, we haven't completed our own internal planning or board approved plan on moving forward, so I hesitate to go into specifics. But the company will continue to grow, and one of the key things for us is operating profitably, and that is a milestone we're just about hitting now, or close to now, and,
right.
and should continue moving forward. That in itself is a big milestone.
Absolutely,
for us.
Yeah. So that was late in the current quarter, if I recall.
Yeah, that was what we've said before, and that
right.
that's still accurate. And then obviously into next year as
right.
well.
What I'm fascinated by is organ on a chip and lab on a chip. I find that so fascinating, and the stuff that you can do with that. If you look out a couple of years in terms of the functionality of it, for instance, in the human body, where you can sort of almost replicate certain function, the kidney and the liver and heart. in itself, that specific small segment, as it is small right now, what sort of growth profile do you see for that?
Yeah, it is an exciting segment, and as you probably saw not too long ago, in the National Geographic cover article was about that particular product, and actually part of what we were developing is on the cover. And I do get excited about it, but I also am a little cautious on it because the reality of it being deployed in mass volume is probably still a little bit away. So we're not counting on fiscal year 20 to have much revenue there, but we do have about a half a dozen customers in which we have deployed actual product, and that works. So it's not a question of that; it's a question of getting through approvals, FDA, that sort of thing. And what's interesting is a number of these companies are being backed by some of the big pharmaceutical companies in the U.S. And so there's a big push to move in that direction, which is either self-care or immediate information in a doctor's office, that these devices can apply with your own DNA of some sort, blood or some other way. So it is exciting, and that's microfluidic for us. And so, again, it fits our skill set, and we're engaged very heavily at both Harvard and MIT in the Boston marketplace, which is near us, which is really driving a lot of research there.
Right. So. Okay. Lastly, on the sensor side of things, all these sensors generate tons of data, and the data is sort of the currency of the future, I guess. You announced something recently where you're taking in sort of a next step, I guess, in data analytics. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, that is an area we've spent a lot of time this past year in doing R&D, and essentially make it simple is we're trying to move some of the analytics out of the cloud and out of mainline computing onto the edge and onto the sensor, onto the device. And so we've deployed a platform that allows us to do edge analytics. And it may not be very heavy, I'll call it, but it's things that need to be done in real time. And so you do events. Essentially, it's one way to look at it is, with our location sensors and some of the other sensors, you bring contextual data together, and you can determine, if you and I were tagged, okay, we're having a meeting in this room, right? So that sort of intelligence that you can then use. And our customers love that because it allows them to get to market faster. They can then use what's basically a smart sensor deployment with these analytics, and then add their capability to it, and then get there much quicker. So so we're excited about it. We're deploying early proof of concepts right now on using that technology.
Right. And so when you implement that with customers at some point, what's sort of the revenue model behind that?
Yeah, so the goal for us, I'll say, let me put it, turn it a little bit. The goal for us there is to move to deploying an entire system, and then getting it as, in the model of platform as a service, so that there's a recurring revenue stream based off of that. So we would do that based on something like the number of sensors you're using, or the amount of data that you're producing. That's how we would, monetize it. And that's an important step for us because, right now we do mostly product sales and a little bit of software licensing sales, but that would flip the dynamic.
Right.
So that's our objective. And I'm getting, very good feedback from customers because it changes their spend from a capital expenditure to operating expense, which is easier for them to go
Right.
do.
Yeah.
And so, I'll say in fiscal year 20, that's sort of our journey as to where we're trying to take the company.
Excellent. Good stuff, Ralph. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.